Hi, everybody. I apologize if Zoom just accidentally kicked a bunch of people out. It was being really weird on my end.
Oh, I thought I was going to get my morning back.
So sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Not three bad.
Ilana, did you see my message from late yesterday?
Yes, I saw a message about the connecting that you set up the DHCP, so DNS record.
No, that you should be able to log into your provisioning host.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't succeed yet, but I will talk with Nevada. I think there is a problem with the password. I don't know.
You shouldn't need a password. You need to use your SSH key to log in.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We will take it off.
Okay.
Going to give it another moment or so, just because I'm not sure, but I think that when I came in, it did a thing that logged everybody out. So I apologize if that affected you guys. I'm going to pause recording for a minute as well. Actually, I'll unpause recording and ask a quick question. Are there future agenda items that people want to see? We don't explicitly have anything identified for next week yet, other than reviewing the stories. And I don't know that folks have actually done much with the stories yet, or the epics.
So Michael, are we discussing about what we are going to do, what we are going to discuss next week?
While we're waiting for folks to reconnect, I just wanted to try and get some feedback on that from folks.
Okay. I don't have any stories from the stories that are already listed. Like I don't have anything to say on those, but I really wanted to talk about some of the works that interns are doing here in the research team for OpenShift metering. So might be Ilana, who's actually looking into that storage and metrics part, can just keep her suggestions on that as well. So I think this would be one of the topics that we can discuss for our next week's meeting.
Let's talk about that offline. I'm not sure if we need to figure out whether that ties into the open state, or in other words, are there things that we can have them working on that tie into the open version or not? My point being that this is currently a Red Hat heavy group, but our hope is to have a larger audience beyond that. So for example, that may or may not be very interesting to Stig, I guess is one person who comes to mind. So what do other people think about that?
I'm just lurking at the moment. Please don't don't take my considerations into account. It's all interesting. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just adding into the Etherpad for this week, proposed future items. HIPAA, one of the things we had was getting some HIPAA compliance people if we have interesting questions or questions we want feedback on in advance. The other was the metering discussion as it may apply to to interns. Okay. I am going to drop the Etherpad in one more time, and then our first agenda item was, Lars, can you give us an update on what's going on with CNV?
Yes, I can. So we've had now a couple successful OpenShift installs, which means we're moving on to kind of the next step, which is going to be getting CNV up and running. That's probably what I'll be trying to tackle today. So by the end of the day, I'll know whether it's going to be easy or not. There are some issues around storage that I'm still trying to sort out. I'm probably going to be bugging some of our CNV or OpenShift contacts about that. At the same time, we're also trying to get Alana's infrastructure up so that she can start pursuing kind of the same thing and see if she can reproduce what I've got. And that is also well on the way. We have the basic infrastructure in place. And as soon as we get her logging into her provisioning node, she should be able to start getting the installer running. And that's kind of where things are right now. Oh, and I guess the last thing is that we had a brief discussion yesterday about storage options for the current cluster. And I guess the immediate answer is they're not great. And we're looking into whether there are spare disks available or whether we can purchase some disks or something to kind of meet OpenShift's expectations with respect to how storage is architected on the worker nodes. And that's it right now.
Cool. Stig, I don't recall if you were on the call when we talked about what CNV is. I just wanted to double check.
I was just looking it up. You read my mind. And I guess it sounds a little bit like Kata containers in terms of the underlying technology, but is the difference that it's not presented as a container, but it's actually presented very much more as a VM. Is that true, Lars?
It is using OpenShift to manage traditional virtualization workloads. So it's using libvirt and QEMU in the back end and OpenShift as your VM orchestration layer rather than, OpenStack or Rev or something else.
Okay, yeah, I see. So you could boot like a Windows VM,
yes,
and it would be transferred as a VM image, and the experience would be very similar to OpenStack end to end, apart from that you've got Kubernetes instead of Nova in the middle. Is that right?
That's kind of the goal, yes. Your interaction with the VM would be after spawning. It would be very much like if you were creating it in one of those other environments. In theory, the management experience is going to be more like OpenShift and managing and the APIs or command lines used for managing containers than it will be for like comparing to the OpenStack model. But otherwise, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the work Alana's been doing has been focused a lot on the CNV OpenShift space. I think a lot of it is going to end up still being applicable, and it's a good model for sort of the level of detail I think that we probably want to get to for some of these stories. So I'd like to introduce Alana.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So I will introduce myself first of all. I'm Ilana, I'm intern at Red Hat. I joined half year ago. I'm second year, I'm finishing my second year at the university for science computer degree. Before I start my formal education, I served in IDF here in Israel 4 years as a IT and DevOps professional. So there was all my my formal knowledge and all my experience was from there. And I came here to work with you and give what I can. Okay, so I will share my screen. Michael, I don't think I can share it.
You should be able to now. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. Okay. So you can hear my screen, right? Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the past few weeks, I've been working with the guys on MOC on SVN, sorry, CNV, and I was in charge to creating this document about the monitoring and logging stacks. So I will present it shortly. I will present it briefly, and I created also this presentation to give my data and my knowledge better. So the first thing I would like to start with, this is what is logging and what is monitoring or metric. Log is more of a logging system, set up a system that are following events that happened on the system and watch it and tell us a story of what is going on in the system. But metrics are more things that are happened, metrics that I collected measurably each point of the time. For example, every 10 seconds, every 12 seconds, 15 seconds, and things like that. So it's collecting some data about some metrics, some component, for example, CPU usage and things like that. So if I will give a good example to the real life. It's like going to the doctor and tell him I'm not feeling so well, not related to the coronavirus, but let's say something with the stomach. So you tell him your history. I was in the restaurants yesterday, and you tell him sort of things that are events that happened to you. And based on that, the doctor can have more understanding of what's going on in your system, what did you experience, and things like that. And if we take in the metrics, it's more of, okay, I will send this person to a blood test, and I will check his, I don't know, white cells, and I will check it tomorrow, and then after a week, and we will see the progression and see what's going on measurably in the system. So this is, for example, the difference. And so this is all written here, of course. And when we're talking about logging, I will do it in present. When we're talking about logs, there's 5 critical components that are good structure for having logging that are informally. So the people can understand what is going on in the system. So there is a 5 whys, as you can see. And here I gave an example of how a good logging should look. So it will give me the timestamp, the user that caused this problem or that associate with that, and an IP, and all of those things that can give me more information about what's going on in the application or in my system. That's okay for now? Yeah, okay. Great. Let's talk about logging levels in log. So as I think most of you are familiar with those logging levels, but it's going to be from most severe to lighter problems. Okay, this is the formal definition, but I would like to work with that. This is more a practical approach. So informally, it's something that events that are going on, and not something very specific, more general logging. Debugging, I used to troubleshoot my code and my systems. Warning, things that, that might not infect my system, but should be looked at. Errors will be something that cause my system to fail or act weird. And alerts, the most severe ones, and need to be fixed. Great. Okay, so basically, and about the metering, this is more simple thing, because when we collect metrics, there are eventually the resource of which we are testing, the information about what we tested, and the timestamp. So this is much more simple concept than those. So my document mainly focus on OpenShift Cloud, OpenShift platform. The monitoring side is those three are the main parts. We have the Prometheus, which is the monitoring system that holds all our logging, all our metrics information, and this is our DB. We have alerting and notification, which are managed by Alarm Manager. The Alarm Manager is looking at the metrics here in the Prometheus, and when it's set up for him to alert, he will send a notification to the admin, here something's going on, please check it. And we have a visualization product, which is it's a Grafana, and it will visualize my all my metrics.
Hey, Alana, I have a question for you on this slide.
Thanks. Yeah, okay.
My impression is that OpenShift has replaced Grafana with its own dashboard UI, so that at least by default, you get a set of dashboards that are native to OpenShift now, and then it provides Grafana as kind of like an optional thing. Is that?
Yeah, yes, it's correct. I also saw it in the new versions that you have a whole tab of monitoring, then there is the default setup, and you can click another button and it will open the Grafana. But I think this is based on that because everything is connected to the Prometheus.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, great. So here I showed how the operators are eventually deploying the components and all the components that are deployed. I will do a quick overview by this diagram that I created. So I will talk about the flow data and how this is going to be. So first of all, the metrics are collected from the hardware, from the underlying layers of the compute of the servers, if it's a working or a master node. And then second thing, the Prometheus will access all those resources to gather all the metrics. So for example, the node exporter, are deployed to each node that we have in the cluster. And he's talking with him and monitoring and getting the information from it. Or for example, we have the cube stat metrics, which are responsible to monitoring and get the metrics about the Kubernetes object that we have and all of those things. Then the Grafana will display it and access the Prometheus. And if needed, an alert will create it and will send to alarm manager, and then it will spread it to the admin. Do you have any questions? Okay. So this is basically the stack. Simple overview. We also have the OpenShift state metrics, which expand the cube state metrics, and it allowed the users or the admin to have more control of what we want to collect. So you can customize your metrics and what is going to be collected. So maybe it's interesting for us in this project. Okay. So I think this is what I want to show you about the monitoring, and we will continue to logging. So the same here, we have three components that are using the OpenShift cluster is using. And I wanted to mention about the monitoring that it's come a pre-installed and pre-configured setup after you deploy OpenShift. But in this case, the logging are not a default setup. You will need to install the two operators and then have the stack working. So we have the Elasticsearch. In this case, this is the storage logs and our DB. On that, with that, FluentD, I hope I'm saying it right. And so I have the FluentD, which is like the node expander. It's deployed to each node to collect, I think, to nodes, yeah, to collect the information and send it back to Elasticsearch. And here we have the product Kibana, that will show us a visualization of my logs. Okay, so here I show also the operators connection. You can see that we have two operators, and each one is managed and deploy in other things. So, for example, the logging operator is responsible for the Kibana, the FluentD to be deployed to every node, and then we have the coder. I hope I said it right, which is responsible for managing our logging stack and make sure that, for example, we don't keep things too long for, I don't know, for 10 days or those sort of thing, because the configuration that he have is like a cron, and he tells me after 10 days, okay, delete, and let's do it again, things like that. I think we can set it up to be to archive our things and those. Great. So here I will also present a quick flow. So first of all, we have FluentD deployed to each node, and this FluentD is talking about is accessing the information in the journal D or OS disk, and collects all the logging that we want from the server, from the node. Then it sends to Elasticsearch cluster. Kibana is accessing it and displaying it. And then, as I told you, we have it managed and how I said, it performs a schedule of maintenance on the system. And last of all is the event router, which collects some information and some data and send it to Elasticsearch indexes and then display in other way. So it's collecting more information about the OpenShift cluster itself, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, and then create a whole index in the Elasticsearch, and the information is stored there. Questions?
Yeah, so how do you handle alarms here?
I think that the event router is also talking with the alert manager, and then if there is something severe, it will send an alert. But let me check it, and I will answer you next week.
So it depends a bit on what kind of alerts you mean. If it's alerts coming from log analysis, or if it's alerts in regards to the actual stack. The actual stack comes with a set of alerts that are actually just Prometheus roles. So the stack itself is monitored by the cluster monitoring operator. Log-based analysis, you have to define your rules theoretically by yourself. In Kibana, there are no predefined rules for anything.
So
is there any way to convert log messages into metrics then? Or, I mean, I've seen that done in similar frameworks, and it's generally quite useful if data's coming to us, telemetry data, but it's coming in log form. It's quite useful sometimes to be able to convert that into a numerical series.
I'm not so sure about it. Maybe someone can add.
I mean, you can do whatever you want with the logs, right? You can as well just do quantitative analysis on it.
You can.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Like, well, I was more or less done.
You can create what is basically a Prometheus exporter that does queries against Elasticsearch and then translates the results into a Prometheus compatible export.
Yeah, as Rick said, eventually this is all data, and we can choose how to use it and how to analyze it and how to we have so many products to even visualize the information there. So I guess there is a lot of products that help us to manage and really to understand the data.
To be honest, like I'm curious. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's my last yeah, page.
I mean, if you are, I'm curious about the exporter actually. Is it just exporting metrics about the sheer count, so to say, of log entries? Because that's like, you should theoretically get an error count or something similar from your actual application metrics, right? So what you would want to be alerting on in your logs is actually, I guess, patterns more or less. Is the exporter actually capable of that? So that you would like, that would be something that I would consider meaningful if you could define a pattern in the exporter, and then it just exports counts for that, for example. Is that what it does? I mean, can you actually just put a link to it in the chat if you have it?
Are you talking about what I was mentioning or something that
Yeah.
Alana? So
No, that what you were mentioning.
Well, so you get to write your exporter, so it can do whatever you want.
Oh, it sounded like there was an exporter already.
No,
So
what I
I've
was
seen
no.
a tool called mtail used in this kind of context before, I believe.
What was that?
Mtail, where you can actually convert a log stream into and extract telemetry from it. I believe that's where it was, how it was used. I think what's the piece that's quite helpful is some sort of log stream based processing, so that because I mean, Lars, I take what you said about polling Elasticsearch, but it sounds kind of interesting as to how you would do that for, you know, all the data since you last polled, and that really seems more adapted to a stream-based thing like Kafka, for example, where you could have the log stream aggregated together and process it in one channel.
Maybe, but I think you want to use Elasticsearch as your source of log data here, because that's where everything is going. You don't want to be collecting the logs with multiple tools, because now you are imposing an additional IO load just to get different data.
Whereas totally. But I think Elasticsearch would remain as being the sort of the repository. But
right.
So if there was some means of doing stream processing in the meantime on the aggregated log stream, that
sure, and that may be exactly what your exporter does. Is it basically tails the stream from Elasticsearch and produces something that Prometheus can consume.
So what you're saying is to actually write an exporter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go back to the question, what's happening with events? So OpenShift is generating a ton of events. And if you want certain events seen as an alert for whatever reason, then this is not covered, right?
I think if I understand what you're saying, it's covered by the alert manager.
No, that's metrics. Alert manager is not capable of alerting on events.
Yes.
But if you're logging into your OpenShift platform and you're clicking on the events button, you're getting lots of events.
Mm-hmm.
And if you happen to want to alert on any of these, that's not possible currently, in my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, the other question would be, is there a possibility in converging both types of events, the events we are seeing via logs? I mean, a log is also a stream of events, and also these events generated by Prometheus rules and routed out via alert manager.
I think I will need to check it. It's a good question. I think I will consult with the consulting team that we are working with to understand it.
Can you repeat the second question again, please?
I would like to converge both events either from logging or and also from Prometheus-based generated events.
It's a pretty useful thing to be able to do, to be able to view them in the same time frame, same context.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes.
I think that's the approach that where the telemetry team is trying to go for OpenShift. So they have some plans to actually bring Grafana's Loki into the stack. And then you would be able to actually see your metrics and your logs in more or less the same platform and just very, very easily bring those together.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I find it quite hard sometimes using the logging support for the display of logs in Grafana. It's not so easy to search as Kibana, but I mean, having both, they play different roles in some ways in that you can see the timeline and the time frame in Grafana very nicely. Kibana is nice if you're just trying to figure out what just happened. You paste a UUID in, it's sort of free-form search is very good for that.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks for all the inputs. I learned something new. So yeah, basically that was my work those past few weeks. And Michael asked me to present it. So yeah, you can also add a link to my document if someone would like to see.
One of the things that, so if you have a moment, if you can speak to a bit, was the data that you gathered about sort of the default storage requirements.
Okay, let me exit it. So you are talking about the storage requirements, right? For each one of the stocks, each one of the stacks.
Yep.
Yeah, on the official side of Reddit, I saw this nice diagram that can also help us to understand the size and the requirements for our DB for the Prometheus. I still didn't finish what I wanted to say also about the storage for a Log Manager, so I didn't want to present it yet. But as I see it, eventually it also depends on the application that are going to run. I have another document, Reddit document that shows each application, what size of and what resource it's need per, I don't know, 15 nodes, 100 nodes, and so on. So this is for the Prometheus. I also included a default resource for the Elasticsearch. When we need 3 nodes, it's the minimal requirement, as I understand it. And this is the parameters. Yeah, that's what I have. Is there anything that another thing that you would like to know, or maybe I can research it?
I think one thing that is worth mentioning is that the EFK stack that you can install is actually meant for you to collect the logs of the platform and the application. Whereas the cluster monitoring operator, so the default Prometheus Alert Manager stack that comes on OpenShift 4 is intended to only monitor the platform itself. So by default, whatever you do, you don't scrape any metrics from any not OpenShift-something namespace. I think that's worth mentioning. And then if you consider to actually deploy your own Prometheus operator, the storage requirements could potentially change because you could leverage, for example, Thanos for long-term retention. and then it could get off maybe a bit slower, but for example, a bit cheaper.
Yeah, I think we talked about it the previous meeting, that Thanos is really a good solution for that, because we don't have a lot of space and unlimited space storage to hold our data. Yeah.
So actually, that's an interesting. That'll dump it to object storage, Rick.
I mean, it depends on where you run your Thanos, right?
Right.
I think, if I recall correctly, Frederick talked briefly about it last time, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think there's different options. Like if that's an area to explore further, then probably pinging him again would make sense. Or
The reason that it's interesting to me is that as we move with the NERC and the Mass Open Cloud to trying to get all of as much of the metrics possible open to the community to use, having a way to store it and get at it is going to matter. And I think we're thinking that there's in the same data center as both the New England Regional Cloud and the Mass Open Cloud, there's a pretty large data lake that we can probably do some storage on for that purpose.
Michael, do you know what they use to provide object storage in that environment?
I don't know if they've got S3 running now, but I think that they're planning to, because we've sort of been pushing on them about it.
They're not actually running S3 because that's Amazon's service.
Yeah.
In particular, are they not running OpenStack Swift is the question, because it turns out that Thanos and Swift don't really interact all that great together.
I will find out.
Okay.
And I'll put a link here if I can find it while we're in the meeting. So.
Did you try Thanos and Swift together?
I did, and the Thanos developers told me that they don't interact together all that well. There are, it sounds like there are basically eventual consistency problems with Swift that make it really easy for Thanos to end up with corrupt storage that it can't recover from. So like in our test deployment of Thanos, we are running with the file system backend rather than the object storage backend of any sort, because we don't want to store in S3 itself. Our only other object storage option is Swift in our OpenStack environment, and that turned out to be problematic.
Okay, cool. That's actually interesting. I mean, it's probably worth to mention on a side note that actually some of the Thanos maintainers are working for Red Hat, so it would be very easy for us to actually ping them and get more details.
I mean, I enjoy having a not object storage based option for when you want Thanos to kind of be the end of your metric storage chain and not have to involve another service. So that has worked out okay so far, but I don't know anything about its performance or scalability versus the object storage options. But yeah, Michael, if Nessie provides us with something that is relatively low latency, that would be great.
At the moment, the latency is low because the usage is lower than they hope, but I think their plan is to keep the latency relatively low.
Well, we can help them with usage.
That's the plan.
The VED says they're using Ceph, so Rados Gateway for object storage. Or, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff I'm finding right now is old. It's like 2019.
Okay.
I have a side question, but I don't know that now is the time to ask it. I sort of, but we're in a lull, so I'll ask it.
Yeah, too late. You've told us about it.
Too late. Yes, sorry. Someday I'll get to the point where I can phrase the question before I actually open my mouth. We're sort of heading down this path where we have a couple of different reproducible stacks that we're looking at. it sort of feels like the NERC is going to be, at least initially, heading down an OpenStack direction. We're starting to look at the OpenShift CNV stuff. I think they intend to converge on it. We think the HIPAA stack is likely going to be an OpenShift CNV type solution. Do we need to start flagging things that are unique to those different solutions in the board that we're using to define stories and epics? I wanted to get thoughts on that so we can decide what to do there.
So if I understand what you're asking, wouldn't it make more sense to come at it from the other direction and try to highlight areas where we can share configuration or architecture or whatnot between the various projects?
That would probably also work. My concern was that right now, the concern I was trying to address was we're sticking a lot of stories in there, and I wasn't sure if we'd be able to tell, looking back at them, oh wait, this is not going to be applicable for OpenStack. So I was thinking we would basically flag the things that were unique to one or the other. Or if you're writing a story about the tooling you want to use for OpenStack, it may be a different set of tooling than for OpenShift.
I would argue that our end goal is to have, so for stuff running in a single environment, so like if we're doing both OpenStack and OpenShift within the NERC environment, I think our end goal is to have a common, set of alerting and dashboards and whatnot for that environment.
Yep.
So the goal is going to be some form of compatibility, and our job is going to be trying to define how do we link these things together so that we're not managing like two completely different sets of alerting and escalations and things like that. Or, so that if we want to find out what resources are being used by this particular group, we can find that and it will cover everything.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through how do we make the tool model that in a way that is helpful to us? That's what was starting to think about.
Okay.
And I don't know if folks have thoughts on it. I don't know how much time. I don't know that we've all spent a whole lot of time in the tool. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're hoping to do a review of the stories a week out, but it doesn't feel like we've done a whole lot of work on the stories, probably because we haven't had a thing to touch and play with. I guess that sort of goes to the, do we want to, once the CNV is up and reproducible once or twice, do we want to open it up to this group of folks to poke at and play with and think about?
Yeah. Oh, I think absolutely.
Okay, so how should we go about doing that?
Which part? Opening up the environments for people to play with?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's so first we have to get to the point that we have a functional CNV install, which we don't yet.
Yeah.
But once we do, we can, create accounts and send people URLs. I mean, it's all on the public internet. It's just not currently enabled for anyone to log into.
Okay. So basically, everybody who is going to want access to it, we can have them use a single sign-on access. Or is there a different way?
So we certainly haven't put any effort into integrating these with, a particular single sign-on environment yet. So have to take a look at that configuration. That may end up being relatively easy to do.
Okay. Cool. So we'll sort of call that out as a goal. Not the figuring out, but the goal of once CNV in place, create accounts and let folks in this group, folks here, poke and prod at it.
It looks like natively there's support for a bunch of different authentication providers that we could just enable. I don't know if Keycloak is not one of them, nor is, but OpenID is. So probably we can just link it up with like our existing Keycloak or something.
Does it say OpenID Connect?
It does.
Cool.
That should work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Other stuff that people want to talk about? Alana, I don't know if there were there other things you had wanted to speak to, or were there other things that we should be talking about as a group?
Now that I can think of.
Okay. I'm not one to make a meeting last longer than it needs to. So if there's not other stuff for us to talk about, then let's get 12 hours or 12 minutes. 12 hours would be lovely. 12 minutes of our day back.
Okay.
Going on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See you.
Thanks so much, Alana.